Number one, the first person that reached out or responded to this said, HOA, never again. I hear more bashing of HOAs than probably any other home feature out there. It's something that people just are constantly complaining about because a lot of them, people tend to overstep their bounds. They tend to be way too strict. And believe it or not, an HOA can make life pretty miserable for a lot of people, and it has forced a lot of people to move from certain neighborhoods as well if the HOA is too strict. And so it's one of those things that it sometimes can be a necessary evil. I have seen ways that HOAs have actually helped situations because Welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. This week's episode, we're talking about home buying regrets, things that you wish you could go back and change, or things that people wish they knew before they actually went through the process of buying a home. And I've got a tweet thread I wanted to go through. There's a quote that comes to mind where they say, only a fool learns from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And so there was a tweet thread that I came across that had a lot of responses that were really interesting or brought up memories of things that I think that all people should keep in mind when they're going through the process of buying a home. And so we're just going to go through some of those and kind of talk through experiences of it and things that you may want to consider as well when you're going through to buy. As always, I tell people there's no such thing as a perfect home. There will always be things that you wish you could change or that you wish you could tweak a little, and some things you just learn to live with. But we want to make sure that there's nothing that completely ruins the experience of that homeowning process. And so we're going to go through that. But there was a tweet that I came across posing the question, when buying a house, what's something you thought was minor but has become the bane of your existence? And I wrote out the top 10, either the most popular or interesting responses. Some of them are kind of like a accumulation of several different responses, but wanted to give you some of my top 10. There were a ton of responses that people gave to this, talking about all kinds of experiences they had. Some of those things were things I had never heard of, but there are a lot on here that we tend to hear a lot. And so I just want to reach and mention those. That way you can kind of get a feel for whether or not that's what works best for you. So number one, the first person that reached out or responded to this said, HOA, never again. I hear more bashing of HOAs than probably any other home feature out there. It's something that people just are constantly complaining about because a lot of them, people tend to overstep their bounds. They tend to be way too strict. And believe it or not, an HOA can make life pretty miserable for a lot of people, and it has forced a lot of people to move from certain neighborhoods as well if the HOA is too strict. And so it's one of those things that it sometimes can be a necessary evil. I have seen ways that HOAs have actually helped situations because in a neighborhood, whether people want to admit it or not, every house is connected, right? The home values are all intertwined with one another with the houses in a particular neighborhood. And so if there's a bunch of houses that aren't appealing or that have features that are terrible or don't stand out or look a little tacky, it can have a very real impact on your home's value. And the people that don't have an HOA, they have no recourse or way that they can try to change that issue or change that problem that may be hindering or impacting their value. And so HOAs can help, but I get it. Trust me. There are definitely times where it's all kinds of power trips and egos and everything else that goes into having those HOAs. And so you can try, and I joined the board in my local neighborhood to try and see if I could make sure that I'm involved in it, right? Like I said, if you can't be a part of the solution, then you can't really complain about the problem. And so see if there's a way that you can help out, or see if there's a way that you can do it. But HOA is it's definitely not something that I see going away anytime soon. They're probably here to stay, especially in a lot of the newer neighborhoods where houses are very close together. They have to have some type of HOA or restriction in place. And so it's definitely something that I think that people will just have to learn to live with in certain situations. When you don't have an HOA, we're going to talk about some other things that can cause issues or whatever, and some of these other options. So that's the first one. Number 2, not having $20K of disposable income at any given time to replace a furnace, roof, plumbing. When you own a home, there is always some major expense looming. And yes, that's true. That's kind of a dark way to look at things. But yes, that is the truth. I mean, everything in your house is made of things that are deteriorating, are breaking down, that are getting older. And like I said, it's not going to work the way that it always did or that it was intended. And so, yes, there are expenses that are looming. One tip that we typically give to people is when you own a home, plan on saving 1% of the home's value every single month and setting that aside for repairs or emergencies that come up with the house that need to be taken care of. So if you have a $300,000 home, try to save $300 a month and set that aside just for repairs. You may have several months where there's nothing that goes wrong. You may have a month where the water heater goes out or something. But if you can do that and come up with a consistent plan or a goal for setting money aside for stuff that you know is going to break, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So if you set some money aside for that on a regular basis, that should help you to be prepared, or at least better off than many people are when those things happen, and you can kind of move it. And so, like I said, the HVAC never breaks down at a convenient time. The water heater never breaks down when you are out of town or something like that, or not really using it. Those things always happen when you need them the most. And if you have a little nest egg on the side, it's going to open up your options into how you can get that fixed or corrected and everything else. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. But yes, they're all right. Expenses, major ones, are always looming when you own a home. 3, the freaking yard work. I consider killing all my grass and having a dirty yard every single year. And speaking as someone who has been fighting with my own yard, I fully empathize with this particular tweet. It is definitely something that is way heavy. You have to ask yourself before you, because I will say, people are always talking about how they want a large yard. They want a big yard. They want big space. They don't want to be on top of their neighbor. But one thing they don't often consider is that the bigger the yard, the bigger the lawn maintenance, right? And you have to ask yourself, okay, if I don't have funds or disposable income to pay for a service to take care of that lawn for me, that means that I'm going to be the service, right? And so I'm going to have to go through the process of taking care of this, cutting the grass, maintaining the lawn. Like, did you price grass seed? Did you price fertilizer, mulch? Did you consider how much you're going to have to water that grass in order to keep it up, right? Like, how's that going to impact your water bill? All of these things are things that you need to take into consideration, and it's something that people don't really think about when they're in the process. They just see a large home, a large lot, or a large yard, and they get excited and think about that. But you also need to consider that, like I said, that does have its own downsides. And so ask yourself if you have the funds or if you're prepared to handle the maintenance of a major lawn. 4. So again, the question is, when buying a house, what's something you thought was minor, but has become the bane of your existence? How the backyard drains during heavy rains. That one is a difficult one for a lot of people to see or consider, because especially we're in the middle of, well, not at the middle, we're at the end of June right now, and it's low-key a drought in our area, right? We haven't had rain, or a heavy rain, or a good substantial rain in a long time. And so it's difficult for people who are buying houses right now to see how those lots respond to a heavy rain. You may not get a chance to see that while you're going through the process of buying that home. And so you have to kind of look at the way the yard is sloped. You have to look at the surrounding lots, right? Like your lot may be fine, may be completely flat and not having huge issues, but there could be surrounding lots that all drain downhill to your home. Those are things that you want to pay attention to, right? If your backyard has a hill that slopes downward towards the home, again, you want to see, okay, does that keep sloping down in the front yard, or does it just lay flat so the water just runs down and sits? Those are all things that you have to pay attention to when you're seeing the home, because you may not get a chance to see what it actually looks like. And to be honest, if you ask the seller, hey, does this lot have a heavy rain presence, or is it a monsoon in the backyard every time it rains? They're likely not going to be forthright, or they're going to try to underplay it, because again, they're trying to sell the house. I've never seen a seller say, oh my goodness, it's a complete lake in my backyard every time it rains. They'll usually say, oh, it's a little wet back there, but it's not too bad, whatever, because again, they're trying to sell the house. And so that's something that you have to kind of research your own, as opposed to just taking the seller's word for it. Number 5, the stairs. All 17 of them. You know they hate them because they counted them. So I freaking hate stairs and dream about selling and getting a 1-story. Stairs, again, I can fully understand that. Like I said, the knees aren't getting any fresher. The back pain ain't getting any better, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, every time I forget something, I leave something downstairs, I got to go and climb this all over again. Do I even want it? It's definitely a huge issue. And it's part of the reason, too, why ranch homes or 1-story homes are so desirable, and they tend to have a higher value from a price per square foot standpoint than 2-story homes. It's a larger pool of buyers who are interested in those properties. And so I always tell people the advantage to getting a 1-story is that, again, it's going to appeal to a larger pool of buyers out there, and it's something that can be very helpful. I always have clients coming in saying, hey, we need something that doesn't have stairs, or we need something that's 1-story. I have never had a client come in and say, I have to have stairs. I've never, now granted, they may not mind the stairs, but I've never heard someone come in and demand to have stairs. And so those are things that you need to keep in mind. Like I said, the 1-stories, if you can find them, they're hard to come across nowadays. And with the way the generations are heading, as far as the baby boomers getting older and millennials aging up as well, it's going to be very interesting, right? Because a lot of the new houses that are being built nowadays are all on smaller lots, and they all have stairs. And so we're going to be dealing with this shortage of 1-story homes for a while to come. But if you can come across one, it might be worth giving up a little bit of square footage to get that 1-story home, because again, the value is going to be a stronger bet on those homes, and you don't have to deal with the actual hassle of climbing the stairs yourself every time. Number 6, I had orange trees. They look pretty, but I traveled a lot and went home to pick up the oranges. They would drop to the ground and attract rats, bugs, and little critters. By the time I got done removing 5 trees and replacing them with brushes, it was a few $1,000s. There were several tweets that didn't just reference like orange trees, but they referenced bamboo or some other type of plant or tree or something that was invasive and ended up becoming a huge issue for them. There's no way really to tell in all the cases, unless you are just very interested in plants and know a lot about them, whatever. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily know all that may happen. So one thing that I would suggest is that when you are considering a home to buy, if you see trees or plants or shrubbery in your yard or the neighbor's yard that kind of branches over into yours, I would suggest trying to take a picture of them, or try to figure out on your phone. The iPhone has a really cool feature where you can take a picture of something and you can see on there what type of plant, or get an idea of what type of plant it is. And whatever plants or trees or flowers there are, I would take pictures of them, and then I would Google them and just try to see, hey, what is the general consensus around this plant or this tree? Like, do people have issues with it? Has it caused problems with getting to underground pipes? Has it caused any issues with overlapping, or has it caused a complete runover of an entire lot? Those are all things you want to look at. And so I always recommend, like I said, if you're looking at different trees and stuff like that, take a look to see. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of a new community, like a new construction community being built, and they'll plant a couple of trees or something like that for the person in the front yard for them. The buyer never requested that. The builder just put it there. And that tree eventually gets bigger, and then over the years, it starts to seep in, and it gets to the pipes, and it causes all kinds of issues. And so you want to be aware of whatever shrubbery, whatever trees, whatever landscaping is around that home, and whether or not it can cause potential issues. I'm not saying that that's going to be something that should cause you to just walk away from the deal altogether, but it is something that you would like to know beforehand so you can be prepared and know, okay, is this something I'm going to want to take down? Am I going to want to replace that? And if I do want to replace it, is that something that the HOA will allow if there is one? All questions that you need to consider, but that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind and, as far as the shrubbery and landscaping goes. So again, keeping on, when buying a house, what's something you thought was minor but has become the bane of your existence? Number 7, it said this thing, and it had a picture of a safe that had like a little lock on it, and on top of the safe, there was a hammer, a crowbar, and then around it, you saw all this broken sheetrock and wood and all this stuff. And so it was basically like, I've been trying to rip this thing out of the wall, and I cannot for the life of me get it removed. And that reminded me of the things that I see left behind in homes simply for the fact that it was just too difficult for the homeowner to remove. That is something that often happens a lot. My family, when I was in middle school, my family moved, and we inherited a pool table because it was just so expensive to move out of the home. The seller was just like, you know what, just forget it, just leave it there. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a pool table left behind in a home for that very reason. Right? You might see it like on the 3rd floor or something like that, or in an inconvenient spot, and they're just like, it's worth more hassle than it is to get it or whatever. And it's something that it could be something that you enjoy, and like we played on that pool table for years to come. Or it could be a safe that you're like, oh, I'll move that if I get tired of it, and then find out after the fact, oh my goodness, this thing is the most difficult item that I've ever. It's like moving Thor's hammer trying to get this out of here. You don't want to have to deal with that hassle and stuff. And so always keep that in mind when you're buying. If you see something in the house, or if the seller is like, oh, I'll just leave that, you guys can keep it. Ask yourself why they're leaving it. Ask yourself if 5, 7, 10 years down the road, when you go to sell the home, are you going to want to take that with you? And if the new buyer says that they don't want it, are you prepared and willing to pay for it to be moved, right? Do you want to have to deal with that hassle? Those are all things you want to consider. But that was hilarious because, like I said, I have seen plenty of things left behind for no other reason than it was just a pain to have to deal with. Number 8, having the adjacent lot sit empty much longer than anticipated. The HOA has been neglectful of weed control, and now our 3-year-old sod is straight weeds. It's impossible to keep up without professional intervention. This brought up several stories that I have warned people about over the years, and that is in relation to lots or areas around a home that are HOA owned or HOA maintained. All HOAs are different. They're not all created equal. Some of them do an excellent job of maintaining areas, stuff like that, and others do a poor job, right? There are some where a certain lot or a certain area might be their responsibility to upkeep, but if they don't do a good job of that, there's really nobody to keep the HOA in check, right? Like you can send a complaint to the HOA, but there's nobody governing or keeping control over the HOA. Like you would have to go through the process of getting all the neighbors in the neighborhood on board, or most of them on board, with fighting the HOA alongside you to help correct this issue or correct that item. But there's really nobody holding the HOA responsible for maintaining certain areas. And for that reason, a lot of times I see situations, especially with like new construction, when things haven't officially been turned over to the HOA, you'll see a lot of promises made, right? It's like, hey, that area is owned by the HOA, but don't worry about that. They're going to take care of that. They're going to fix that up. They're going to keep it clean. They're going to keep it mowed, all that stuff. You're going to be fine. But then when it actually comes time for it to happen, or when it actually gets turned over to the HOA, it's forgotten about. They never take care of it. They never do anything with it. And now it's causing issues for you. I see the same thing as well with retention ponds or little areas to help with drainage, right? They might have that situated near a home, and the HOA promises, oh, we'll take care of this, or we'll fix it, or we'll clean it up. And then they don't. And then it becomes an eyesore, it becomes an issue. And since other people in the neighborhood may not be able to see it, it's not a priority for them to fix it. And so they don't really listen to the homeowner, or their complaints fall on deaf ears, and it just causes a whole lot of issues. And so just be prepared for that. Like I said, if you see, or if you're interested in a home that is next to a vacant lot or an empty lot that's supposed to be HOA maintained, I would make the assumption that they're not going to do a good job keeping it up. And you have to ask yourself, are you willing to deal with that? Or are you prepared to deal with that hassle before you move forward with that home purchase? Because that has more often than not become the case. That is definitely something that you want to make sure that you're prepared to have to deal with. The other thing, and this also happened in my neighborhood, if there's a vacant lot, right, and it's kind of owned by the city or owned by the HOA and stuff like that, and you're just thinking to yourself, oh, that's not a big enough lot for them to build a house on. It's not a big enough area for them to do anything with. That area, I'm sure, will just stay as is. Don't make that assumption. We had a couple of lots in our neighborhood that were there for 20 years, and they just sat vacant, and everyone assumed, oh, these lots aren't big enough to build houses on. They're not big enough to do anything with, and they're going to stay that way. Well, turns out they were big enough. A developer bought a couple of those lots, built brand new houses on them. And so now the people who thought, oh, I have this nice lot that backs or is neighboring a vacant area, now they've got a big old house right there next to them, right? And so don't always make the assumption that just because a lot is vacant that it can't be built on. All right, so when buying a house, what's something you thought was minor but has become the bane of your existence? Number 9, traffic. Was shown the house 3 times, but only during the middle of the day. They were saying that it was just crazy once they went out of the house during rush hour. This one, another one that is sometimes difficult depending on when you can see the home. Sometimes it doesn't always work with the homeowner's schedule to see the house during rush hour times. And so one of the things that you can do is, first of all, just drive out there yourself during night, during rush hour times, just to get a feel for it. But also you can Google Maps the route or the location or the drive and see how it looks during certain times of day, right? You can see, okay, I looked it up on Google Maps right at like 5:15, and there's a huge red strip that shows up there consistently. So that's letting me know just how bad the traffic can get on that line. Or it might let you know like, hey, there was an accident this day, so that's the reason why it was bad. But that's very helpful. Other things you want to pay attention to is little small things that people don't necessarily think about until they actually go there in person. One thing that comes to mind for me, my wife hates making left turns onto a road that doesn't have a stoplight, right? When you just have to judge it yourself and just figure out, does it make a turn? So many terrible accidents have happened as a result of that, especially in high traffic areas. And so if you're in a neighborhood where you have to pull out and make a left turn with no light, again, you want to make sure you're tracking the traffic patterns and looking at that area over a long time so you can get a feel for, okay, how far is it? How long is that going to take me? Is that going to be a 10-minute add-on to my morning commute every single morning? Those are things that you want to think about and pay attention to. Again, it may not be something that's so terrible that you just walk away from the deal altogether, but it is something that you do want to consider as far as, okay, are there enough things I like about this house to make me overlook that inconvenience? Those are things you want to pay attention to. All right, so last on this thread. This was a tweet that wasn't really mentioning a issue, but I thought that it was the perfect response, the perfect way to end this episode. And there was a person that responded to that particular tweet and said, "How fortunate are we that these are our issues? Imagine complaining about how my fridge is too far away or I have too many stairs to someone without a home. Stay humble, my friends." And I think that is an excellent reminder for us who are homeowners to keep in touch in all these cases, right? Like I said, we're constantly going through the process of talking about all the things we don't like about our home, all the things we don't like about where we live. And it's very easy, especially on social media, to get caught up in a negative or an ungrateful mindset. And so despite all the things that you may or may not like about the home that you end up buying, always, always, always keep that in mind, that there is someone out there who would want nothing more than to own a home, who would love to have the problems that you complain about on a regular basis. Keep that in mind. And so I hope that you all continue to stay grateful, but also work hard to achieve those home ownership goals. As always, I hope that you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next time.